We are very honored and privileged today to have Dr. Hasmukh Hatia, Secretary Financial Services, Government of India, come and speak to our students and faculty. He is here to address our students on financial sector reforms in India as they stand today, and he will be talking to our students, the PGP students and all of the students on the campus on various schemes that the government has been announcing in the last 1 year. We are really privileged to have the Secretary come and tell us the rationale and objective of all the schemes that have just recently been announced. Dr. Hatia, we welcome you to Indian Institute of Management. We are thankful to you for accepting our invitation to come and speak to our students. So, we thought we will take this advantage of your presence here to explain to our students some rationale and objectives of the schemes that the government has been announcing. The government has been telling us a lot about banking sector reforms in the last 1 year. This has been a bad time. Globally, economic situation has been bad. Our own commercial banks have been recording lots of stressed assets. And we were wondering what are the reasons and what is that the government is planning to do for the rising stressed assets, especially in public sector banks.
Well, first of all, I must tell you that let us talk about the number first. The first statement I would like to make is that the gross NPA of public sector banks now is 5.2% of their net loans. If we include the portion of restructured assets, because according to RBI, if there is a project which is restructured by giving them some kind of a reschedulement of installments, etc., then that project also has to be put in a category of a stressed asset. So if you take the block of restructured standard assets, as they are called, the percentage is 8%. So total we have got 13% of assets which are stressed assets. Now this is definitely higher compared to the situation in the private sector bank, where the stressed assets are less than 5%, gross NPA as well as the restructured assets. Now, is that a matter of worry for us? That is first thing I would like to answer. Yes, it is, and yes, it is not. No, it is not. Why it is not a matter of worry is that in the past we have seen that because of so many circumstances, there was a time in 2001 when the gross NPA, not the restructured assets, there was no concept of restructured assets at that time. So that was never counted. The restructured assets calculation came later on. RBI insisted on it later on. But in the year 2001, the gross NPA of public sector bank was as high as 13%. Over a period, it came down to 11, 9, 8, 5. The lowest it came down was 2.33% in the year 2008. In the year 2008, the situation was such that the gross NPA of private sector bank was more than that of public sector bank. And so private sector banks were really worried about it. They started restructuring their portfolio. They did not participate in many of the infrastructure lending opportunities which came at that time. And public sector banks, because for the sake of economy, somebody has to give money to the infrastructure projects. So most of the infrastructure projects got financed by public sector banks during that period, 8, 9, 9, 10, 10, 11. And unfortunately, the major expansion of credit took place in these 3 years. In the subsequent 3 years, because of various factors in the economy, some of these projects got stuck. Number one, the gas did not get produced as we had envisaged in the economy. The gas prices firmed up in the international economy. Of course, now it is coming down, but still not to the extent at which we can afford it to run a power plant. The coal allocation got cancelled by Supreme Court, and we had to rejig the whole coal mines business, and so many of the power projects were stranded. Land acquisition took a lot of time because of so many new legislations and acts, etc. So because of variety of factors, and also on top of it, the world economy is softening, the GDP of world also softening, and our exports also sort of not rising to the extent we would have loved them to rise. So because of all these factors, now we have come to a situation wherein the credit growth rate is moderate, but because of the stress in various projects, those projects have to be restructured for some time. And so the percentage of restructured project has become 8%, and the total impaired asset is about 13% now. But one good news is that compared to December quarter, when the gross NPA of public sector bank was 5.64%, in March quarter it has come down to 5.2%. So we do hope that we are on a declining trend now, and over a period we would be able to get out of this.
I think that's very good thing. You have reminded our students about the fact that there's nothing to panic. 13% we have already seen those years, and we have been in control of that situation. I think our students would be happy to know that. I would also like to mention that in 1994, when we first started recording the NPAs, we were nearly 19%. So you really bring hope, and there's nothing to panic. I think that's a very good message that you are covering. We are thankful to you for making that observation. So one of the issues which my students keep asking me, is it the case that public sector banks are undercapitalized? Because we keep hearing that the government is going to provide capital funds to the public sector banks. And if so, if you are really thinking of providing the funds to the public sector banks, the capital funds, what would be the justification for doing so?
Well, this is an important question which people are now asking in the economy, and there is a lot of discussion generated by media also that public sector banks needs more capital. I would like to dispel the myth that public sector banks are undercapitalized. They are not. As you know, the Basel III norm, which is the strictest norm, and India has accepted Basel III norms. RBI has put some more margin on top of Basel III norms, which are prescribed by Basel. And in spite of having this extra margin put in by RBI, as on today, we are more than adequately meeting the capital requirement of public sector banks. No bank is defaulting. And I can assure you that even in 2016 March, even if we have a growth rate of 14-15% for credit in each bank, none of them will be going below the Basel III norms. They are meeting the Basel III norms. But the question is that at a time when they are supposed to make so much of provisioning for restructured projects, because till last year, RBI stipulated that only 5% provisioning will have to be done if you restructure a project. But from 1/4/2015, now the requirement is that it will be as good as bad asset, restructured project, and you will have to make a full provision of 15% in the first year for restructured project. So because of this restructuring requirement, which has come about because of specific requirement of the economy is passing through a kind of a time when all these projects have not been able to take off because of variety of reasons. At this time, we do need some kind of a buffer for them so that all this provisioning can be done. Number two, if we have to raise some capital from the market, because one of the ways of raising capital for public sector bank is, we are telling them that you can bring down the stake of government to 52%, and you can sort of float more capital in the market. If they have to go to the market has to perceive them as good player, then only the market will give them a good price. So in order to improve the valuation of public sector banks also, we need a buffer. The higher the capital buffer, the market will perceive less of risk in a investment in a public sector bank. And so with that viewpoint in mind, we are convinced that we need to give some more capital to the public sector banks, and we would be giving. We have already got a provision of about 8,000 crore to be given to public sector banks as capital this year. But Finance Minister has already announced that we will also look at their additional requirement. And as of now, we are in the process of having a presentation by each bank about their capital requirement, about their strategy, about their growth plans for credit as well as deposits, and about the possibility of raising capital by them through any other means. So we have almost completed the round of strategy presentations by each and every bank. Minister of State for Finance, Mr. Jayant Sinha, and myself, both of us have sat through the presentation of 21 banks so far. And this, after this presentation, what we will do is that we would definitely give a margin of comfort to all the banks so that they are not at all having any threat of coming below the Basel norms and they have a comfortable buffer. But apart from that, some additional quota of capital we are planning to give to people who would promise us some kind of a performance, not in terms of top line or bottom line, but in terms of certain efficiency criteria which we are going to fix. So it would be a capital which will be linked to some kind of an efficiency parameter, performance parameters. And if they perform, we would like to reward them with some more capital. This is what we are basically thinking about.
So I think this is very interesting, and this observation I think is also very critical, that we are already adequately capitalized and our Basel norms, we are already fulfilling the Basel norms. Actually, we are ahead of many other countries as far as Basel norms are concerned, and I think this observation is so true. Just about a week back, there was a report from the BIS which said that India is doing better than many other countries on Basel norms. We are absolutely on the front. I think this is very reassuring that this is just adding a comfort zone for our banks. One issue that keeps coming up repeatedly is the public sector banks keep getting recapitalized. You have mentioned that there will be some performance indicators and the recapitalization would be on some performance indicators. Would you like to elaborate as to what would be these conditions on which not only the better performers but all the commercial banks would get some capital from the government?
Well, let me tell you that earlier the method of monitoring the performance of public sector banks was more based on top lines, credit growth rate, kitna karoge, or it was based on some such parameters, deposit growth rate, etc. But what we would like to do is to really focus on specific parameters of efficiency. For example, one of them could be return on net worth. The second could be return on assets. Now there is a wide gap between the performance of public sector banks and the private sector banks. The return on assets of last year of public sector bank is as low as something like 0.5, while that of private sector bank is something like 1.7 or 2, it's close to 2. So there is a wide gap in return on assets. So we would like them to use their assets efficiently and generate some kind of a return on that. This could be one. We can also have a criteria of cost to credit ratio, that kind of a, so they can cut down their cost and they can have better NIM. Net interest margin could be another area of efficiency which can be measured. So these are the various parameters we are thinking of, which are not necessarily focused on bottom line, but which are actually trying to make them more efficient in terms of their operations.
So as I understand, there are going to be some conditionalities and performance related support which the government is thinking. I have one more question. If you have time, we could ask you that. Yeah. And this question was on the PJ Naik committee on governance reforms. Would you like to share some thoughts on PJ Naik committee? Is the government thinking something on governance issues in PJ Naik? I understand some of these issues have been discussed in the government and in the parliament.
In fact, the performance of public sector banks have deteriorated because of not focusing on the governance reforms in public sector banks. So we're taking a number of steps in this, and I think most people know about it. One is in the budget, it has been announced that we'll set up a bank board bureau. This is a body of professionals, the bankers, which will actually monitor the performance of public sector banks. They will also work as the search and recommendation committee for all the positions to be filled up in public sector banks. And this particular body will continuously guide public sector banks, and they will also recommend suitable measures to be taken by all public sector banks about their HR policies, about their strategies and things like that. Once this bank board bureau is constituted, it will be a kind of a link between the government and the banks, because the government in the ministry may not be able to directly look after the bank's performance and guide them properly. We are not probably equipped for that, while we need a body of professionals to do that. So that is one measure already announced. We already announced the separation of the post of chairman and MD. So there will be a non-executive chairman and an MD, so that there is a proper corporate governance in public sector banks. The issue of right kind of selection process for the MD's position, that was addressed. The earlier scheme was junked, and we have got a new scheme in which there are 3 different interviews of half an hour each. So at least for an hour and a half, 3 different panels, they take the interview of candidates. And even before that, we have some kind of a psychometric test done by private agencies also for selection of MDs of public sector banks. And also we have thrown open for the first time the positions of MDs of 5 big banks to private sector also. And we hope the selection process is already on way now, and we hope to sort of announce the results very soon for appointment of MDs of 5 big banks. So all these governance reforms will pay off. The procedure for selection of non-official director in banks board, that is another thing which has been addressed. We haven't done any appointment for last 8-9 months because we were overhauling the procedure for that. And now there is an independent committee which recommends the names of independent directors, keeping in view the profile of skill which the board wants, with the bank wants, and matching with the candidate's profile. So we are trying to do that kind of a matching. So every bank board should have somebody good in IT, somebody good in HR, somebody good in risk management, somebody good in law, somebody good in finances, and some banker also, ex-banker also. So we are trying to give a diversified set of skills to the banks for their board independent directors. So once we are having final selection, etc., and once we have the MDs in place, non-executive chairman in place, all the independent directors in place, I think the entire banking sector would be board governed, and that will be very important then. Then we can expect some kind of a qualitative improvement in the performance of public sector banks. So a lot of things we are doing, and many of these are covered by the PGNAG committee and many other committees. Everybody knows what the solution is. It's a question of walking the talk now. So we are trying to walk the talk now, and we really want to, one of the things which we had done was that after Gyan Sangam, which was a retreat of all the bankers, the Prime Minister himself had assured all the bankers that there will be zero interference from our side. We will not interfere in the commercial decisions of the bank, nor shall we interfere in the transfer matters, HR matters, nothing. So now we have completely stopped. I have told all my officers, and not only officers of my department and ministry, we have told all other ministries also never to recommend anybody's case to the bank. They will take their own commercial decisions based on merit. Now that kind of an autonomy is given, non-interference policy is adopted. So let us hope that with right kind of people being put at the helm of affairs in banks, right kind of board being put in, with this kind of a non-interference policy being promised by government, they'll be able to manage better.
I agree with you. These are path-breaking things that you have just mentioned on the PG committee. For the first time when I read on the website of the Ministry of Finance that one can apply for the post of independent director of a commercial bank, I knew there is a sea change which has already come in. Exactly, making a distinction between the chairman and managing director, I thought also was a very good step. We must thank you for your time. I'm sure with this interaction our students are really going to benefit, and we must thank you for your time to speak to us for the benefit of our students. Thank you.